Tennis has a long and impressive pedigree, and is the granddaddy of all racket sports. The techniques and tactics are complex, and the best playing style for you will depend on your mobility, experience and temperament. The following generalized advice is no substitute for individual tuition from your own coach. Now, I have absolutely no prejudice against women or left-handers, but in order to avoid clumsiness of speech, I may refer occasionally to the student as male and right-handed. The basic shape of a classical tennis stroke is a cutting action. The racket moves from high to low. This is the opposite of a lawn tennis stroke, wherein the racket travels from low to high, like this, imparting topspin. A ball struck with topspin rises off the back wall, giving the opponent plenty of time to play the ball. By contrast, when a cut stroke, like this, hits the back wall, it comes down, which is much more difficult for the opponent. It rushes him. For the standard grip, the racket should be taken by the throat in the left hand. 3 fingers of the right hand should be placed underneath the handle and the thumb and forefinger either side. Adjustments are made for comfort, and I suggest that you leave the heel of your racket hand about 2 inches from the butt. With this grip you can play forehands, both off the floor and the back wall, and backhands off the floor and the back wall. Starting with the forehand stroke off the floor, I should be concerned with the feet, the knees, hips, shoulders, elbow, wrist, and the movement of the racket head as the stroke is played. Let's start with the feet. Here's Penny Lumley, the ladies' world champion, in action in the final of the British Ladies' Championship at Hollyport. Now let's take another look at Penny, concentrating on her feet. See how light she is in her tread, forever bouncing on the balls of her feet when awaiting the return. Constantly adjusting. As for the specific pattern of footwork, a lawn tennis player moving to a ball that is wide of him will turn and run for it, hitting the ball something like this. The squash player will scramble rapidly to a similar foot position. The tennis player, however, wants to have his weight transferring from his back foot to his front foot down the line along which he intends to strike the ball. This is the ideal footwork for tennis. A number of small, light steps to position the body, and then a large step down the line of the stroke. On to the knees. Bending is important at all times, especially if the ball is low, but it is essential that the front knee is bending rather than straightening in the act of making the shot, so that the body weight is moving forwards and down rather than backwards and up. In the last century, players were instructed to stoop while awaiting service. These days the advice is to be slightly crouched at all times. This has the effect of putting you on the balls of your feet, whereas standing erect can throw your weight back on your heels, decreasing your takeoff speed. Here's the position you want. And here's a great example of Nick Wood demonstrating it in competition. As far as the shoulders are concerned, they should remain level with each other and rotate together through about 90 degrees. The 2 most common faults to avoid are dropping the right shoulder below the left and opening out the left shoulder before contact. Both lead to loss of power and control. Try to stay level and balanced. At the start of the swing, the arm should be well bent at the elbow and relaxed. At the finish, the arm should be almost straight, the straightening process having been delayed as long as possible. There are 3 things you can do with the racket head. You can raise and lower it in a vertical plane, you can move the head from left to right in a slapping action, and you can rotate the head through about 180 degrees. For the ground stroke, all these want to be strictly controlled. Adjust with your feet and your knees and try to keep your wrist firm. The racket head should start at a position above and behind your right shoulder and descend diagonally forward as you step into the ball. The length of the follow-through depends on the speed of the oncoming ball. The faster it is, the less follow-through. In action, it looks like this. Here's a fast ball, and here's a slow one. And here's Paul Tabley showing his style. Andrew Lyons from Queen's Club switches hands to play forehands on both sides of his body. The principles of playing a backhand are the same as for the forehand, and I shall highlight only the important differences. The first of these is your position relative to the ball. On the backhand you should take the ball further in front of you than on the forehand. This is because your racket shoulder is behind you for the forehand, whereas it leads the body on the backhand. So to have the same angle on your arm at impact, reach further forwards. The other difference concerns weight of shot. On the forehand, power is produced by rotating the upper body in impact, by stepping forward and by bending. Rotating is natural on the forehand, but on the backhand it is natural to swing without rotating. To produce the optimum weight of shot, you should learn to bring your left side through. Keep your shoulders hunched and your left hand moving forwards. This is what it looks like with a ball. Note the short, punchy follow-through. Here's Steve Ronaldson's technique. And Sue Haswell's. And Leslie Ronaldson's. For the half volley in particular, the follow-through should be restricted. Let me deal now with the forehand off the back wall and the differences from the floor shots. I'll start once more with the feet. The general guideline for footwork here is that you should try wherever possible to move in the same direction as the ball. As it comes off the back wall, move forwards with it. This makes the ball slower relative to you. Next, the face of the racket. Off the floor it is closed, but for backwall shots the face should be opened. Positioning. Whereas the ball is taken out in front on floor shots, off the back wall it is taken opposite you, between your 2 feet. Bending is very important. When the ball is coming towards you, you should bend into the shot. From the back wall, you should bend earlier, so that the whole stroke is played from a crouched position. Let's look at the follow-through. Short off the floor, longer and flowing off the back wall. Finally, there is the height at which you should take the ball, which should be low. Here's a beginner snatching at the ball at the top of the bounce. The more experienced player waits, gains time and thus control. Putting it all together, it looks like this. And with the ball from the opponent, and here's the elegant Paul Tabley again. Now for the differences in the backhand when it comes off the back wall. Firstly, in order to open the racket face properly, turn your wrists at the back of the hand face the ceiling. Next, rotate your torso so that you're showing some of your back to your opponent. Finally, strike the ball when it is just in front of your leading foot. Notice the openness of the racket face at the point of contact. Here it is in practice. And here's Nick Wood in competition. Andrew Davis from Oxford. The British Open is almost always held at the famous Queen's Club in London. Here's Chris Ray in action, showing us how these strokes are put together. Right, let's move on to the service. I'll start with the bobble. The ball is struck without spin, just above knee height, so that it lands halfway up the penthouse above hazard first gallery. From there it should bumble in an arc nearly to the top of the penthouse and then down again, pitching close to the nick on the grille wall. The skill lies in weighting your pace of stroke against the slope of the penthouse. Length is the primary consideration. Much the same technique applies to the boomerang, except that this demands a much firmer stroke that pitches the ball onto the server's penthouse beyond the winning gallery. From there, the ball should bounce onto the grille penthouse, the high back wall, and back onto the side penthouse, before running along the back wall. For most other services, spin is required. Usually this is best achieved by shortening your grip and turning the racket face in your hand in order to open it. For the sidewall service, face the main wall and lift your racket above your shoulder with your elbow well bent. Take a step to your left and, simultaneously, lift the ball into the air about head height opposite your left shoulder. You should feel as if you're striking the far underside of the ball. The ball should then travel directly up to the service wall, where its spin will drag it down sharply onto the penthouse. From there it should bounce to the floor, ideally some 6 feet from the grille wall. Your spin will tend to slow the ball on the floor and bring it down and towards the timbre off the grille wall. This is Fiona Ducar showing us her technique in the British Ladies Championship. For the underarm twist, start with the racket head high and to the side of you. Take a step forward and to the left, and as you do so, drop the ball in front of you. Your racket should now drive down and across the ball, imparting side spin and cut. The ball should bounce just once or twice in the lower portion of the penthouse, leaving most of the spin for your opponent to deal with. Here is Leslie playing the underarm twist at Queen's. The demi-piqué unsettles the receiver who likes to volley. Using a sidewall action, knock the ball into the penthouse above hazard first gallery. It should then bounce up to the service wall and off it with enough pace either just to hit or just to miss the penthouse on the way down. This is what causes uncertainty for the volleyer. The drag is another service that employs a sidewall action, but it requires great control. The ball should curve gently through the air and land on the very edge of the penthouse above hazard first gallery. Take another bounce or two and die in the receiver's corner. The drop service is given from near the main wall with the sidewall action. The ball is struck from a little lower and is directed towards the rafters. If it lands on the penthouse, it then plop into the back corner. If it glances to the sidewall, it is called a high sidewall service, and it should run at speed along the back wall. Great fun this, but like many others, a little too risky for a second serve. The giraffe is a service that combines a large vertical fall, a favourable spin, and the slope of the penthouse to produce a ball that moves quickly off the penthouse and runs tight along the back wall. Use an underarm twist action, but strike the ball above knee height, aiming at the beams. Remember that height is just as important as spin. For the railroad service, you will need a different grip. Hold the racket as if you were using the forehand face as a mirror. Then, take the racket back over your shoulder and take a step forwards into the left. Throw the ball about 2 feet above your head and in front of you, and strike it at the top of its flight. With the racket face pointing to the top of the timbre, hit across and underneath the ball. And follow through past your left leg. The railroad should fly quickly along the edge of the penthouse and spin from the back wall back towards the winning gallery. The following sequences will deal with the receiver, beginning with the return of the short service. This is the easiest of the cut shots, and you should attack it accordingly. Raise your racket a little higher, strike down a little steeper, and bend aggressively into the shot. Keep a firm wrist and take the ball at the top of the bounce.